The mining station orbited Frosthaven 12 in near silence, save for the hum of machinery and the faint crackle of static from the radar array. Kyra Vels sat alone in the dimly lit operations room, her crystalline fingers hovering over the console. The monotony of her shift was as frigid as the planet below, a desolate, icy wasteland. Radar contact detected, the station AI suddenly announced, its voice calm yet jarring in the stillness. Kyra blinked and leaned closer to the screen. A blip had appeared on the radar, faint but steady. "That's odd," she muttered, her amber eyes narrowing. Traffic in this sector was almost non-existent. Who would venture so far into the void? Her fingers danced across the controls, magnifying the signal. The screen filled with data, ship's size, trajectory, energy signature. Kyra froze. The design was unlike anything she'd seen before. The vessel was long and angular, its hull scorched and rusted, as though it had been drifting through the void for centuries. A label flashed across the screen, Terran-class vessel. Kyra's heart skipped a beat. Terran? No. It couldn't be. Humans didn't exist. They were a myth, a story whispered in dim-lit cantinas. The galaxy's archives claimed they'd been wiped out centuries ago in a war they couldn't win. And yet, the radar didn't lie. She hesitated, her crystalline skin glinting under the dim light. Should she report this? Her supervisor, Jorath, would likely scoff. A ghost ship, he'd call it. The Zarelian miners were practical to a fault, dismissing anything that didn't contribute to ore quotas or repair schedules. The AI interrupted her thoughts. Incoming signal detected from unidentified vessel. Kyra's breath caught. A signal? Her hands trembled as she opened the comm channel. Static hissed and then, "Help us!" The voice was faint, broken, and distorted by time and space, but unmistakably human. She sat back, her mind racing. Someone, something, aboard that ship was alive. She replayed the message, her fingers tightening around the console. It was brief, but the urgency in those 2 words was impossible to ignore. The myths had always described humans as stubborn survivors, but could they have truly endured for this long? Kyra glanced at the door to ensure she was still alone. Her supervisor wouldn't return for hours, and no one else would care enough to notice. She typed quickly, isolating the signal and running it through the station's translation database. The ancient Earth language was a near-extinct dialect, but the AI managed to piece it together. "Help us! Systems failing. Require assistance." The words made her crystalline heart pulse faster. This wasn't just a relic. This was a cry for help. Her comm panel lit up again, this time with an incoming video feed. Against every protocol, Kyra accepted the transmission. The screen flickered before resolving into the image of a man. His face was pale, his eyes sunken but piercing. His clothing, a battered jumpsuit with faded insignias, matched the descriptions Kyra had read in forbidden archives. "This is Captain Nathan Cole of the Resolute," he said, his voice strained but steady. "If anyone can hear this, we're in critical condition. Reactor offline. Life support failing. Please respond." Kyra's mouth went dry. She opened the mic channel, her voice shaking as she spoke. "This is Frosthaven 12 mining station. I hear you, Resolute. What are you doing out here?" The man's expression shifted from desperation to cautious hope. "Frosthaven 12? That's a Zarelian station, isn't it?" "Yes," she replied, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm Kyra Vels, a technician. Your signal came through my radar. But," she hesitated, her curiosity outweighing her fear, "humans aren't supposed to exist." Captain Cole gave a weary chuckle, his face lined with exhaustion. "Funny. We could say the same about myths of crystalline aliens. But we don't have time for debates. Our systems are failing. Can you help us or not?" Kyra swallowed hard. Protocol dictated she should escalate this to her supervisor immediately. But something deep inside her, the same restless curiosity that had driven her to study human myths in the first place, compelled her to act. I I'll see what I can do, she said. But your ship, how did it end up here? Where have you been all this time? Cole's face darkened. That's a long story, one we don't have time for right now. We've been in stasis for a long time. Woke up to find half the systems fried and the galaxy looking a lot different than we remembered. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes imploring. Please! We're running out of air. Kyra nodded, her decision made. Send me your coordinates. I'll do what I can to guide you in. As Cole relayed the information, Kyra felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. She was about to make contact with living humans, a discovery that could rewrite galactic history. But if anyone found out what she was doing, the consequences could be severe. The Resolute appeared on the station's external cameras minutes later, its ancient hull barely holding together. Kyra stared in awe as the ship limped closer, its engines sputtering. The vessel looked like it had been dragged through a war zone and left to rot in the void. Frosthaven 12, we're docking now. Cole's voice crackled over the comms. Kyra's hands flew across the console, guiding the ship to the least damaged docking bay. The Resolute groaned as it settled into place, its hull creaking under the station's artificial gravity. As the airlock hissed open, Kyra stood frozen, her heart pounding. She had no idea what to expect. The myths described humans as cunning, resourceful, and dangerous. And now, one was about to step through the door. The first figure appeared, silhouetted by the dim light of the Resolute. It was Cole, his movements stiff but purposeful. Behind him, two others followed, thin, pale, and clearly struggling to adapt to their surroundings. Kyra's voice caught in her throat. For a moment, all she could do was stare. Then Cole spoke, breaking the silence. Thanks for letting us in, he said, his tone both grateful and wary. I take it you're Kyra? She nodded, finding her voice. You're real. He gave a faint smile. Real enough. Now let's see if we can keep it that way. Kyra motioned for them to follow her into the station, her mind racing with questions. Who were these people? How had they survived? And what would happen if anyone else discovered their existence? As the airlock sealed behind them, Kyra realized she had just crossed a line she could never uncross. The myths were real, and she was now part of a story that would change everything. The station's cramped briefing room was dimly lit, the only sound the faint hum of life support systems. Kyra sat across from Captain Nathan Cole, his two crewmates slumped nearby, breathing heavily. Their exhaustion was palpable, but Kyra's mind raced too quickly to feel tired. All right, Cole said, breaking the silence. His voice was hoarse, but his tone was firm. We owe you one for pulling us in. But we need to talk about what happens next. Kyra frowned. What happens next is you explain how you got here. A Terran ship appearing out of nowhere? If anyone finds out, they'll... Exactly, Cole interrupted. If anyone finds out, we're dead. You think this galaxy is ready to welcome a bunch of humans back with open arms? From what I've seen, they're not. Kyra hesitated, his words sinking in. She'd grown up hearing stories of how humanity had been wiped out in a war of their own making, painted as reckless and dangerous. The idea that someone might want them dead now, centuries later, wasn't hard to believe. You have to understand, Kyra said quietly. This isn't just about you. If anyone finds out I helped you, I'm as good as exiled or worse. Cole studied her for a moment, his expression softening. I get it. You didn't sign up for this. But we didn't ask to be stuck in the middle of nowhere either. We just want to survive. One of his crewmates, a woman with short-cropped hair and hollow cheeks, coughed weakly. Captain, she murmured, we need to stabilize the reactor soon, or it's over for us. Cole nodded grimly and turned back to Kyra. Our ship's falling apart. Life support's barely holding on, and the reactor's one bad spark away from blowing. We need parts, fuel, stabilizers, anything you've got. Kyra exhaled, conflicted. The mining station's resources were limited, and requisitioning parts without raising suspicion wouldn't be easy. But leaving them to die wasn't an option she could live with. Okay, she said finally. I'll see what I can do. But you'll need to stay hidden. If my supervisor finds out. A sudden alarm blared, cutting her off. Kyra's crystalline skin shimmered faintly as she turned to the comm panel. The station AI's voice was cold and detached. Unidentified vessels detected entering Frosthaven 12 airspace. Estimated arrival, 5 minutes. Kyra's stomach dropped. She glanced at Cole, whose face had gone pale. What kind of vessels? The AI responded without hesitation. Orion Pact Enforcement Fleet. 6 ships. Designation, Commodore Hecker Vaughn. Cole swore under his breath, standing abruptly. We're out of time. They're here for us. Kyra's heart pounded. She had heard stories about Commodore Vaughn, a ruthless enforcer of galactic order, known for his zero-tolerance policy on anything that threatened stability. If he was here, it wasn't for a friendly chat. You need to hide, Kyra said, her voice shaking. Now. Cole didn't argue. Where? She thought quickly, her mind racing through the station's layout. Maintenance tunnels, she said, pointing toward a nearby hatch. They're sealed, but no one checks them. Go! Cole grabbed his crewmates, helping them to their feet. You coming? I can't, Kyra said firmly. If I disappear, they'll know something's up. I'll stall them. Just stay hidden. Cole hesitated, then nodded. Be careful. Kyra watched as the 3 humans disappeared into the hatch, the panel sliding shut behind them. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her posture and moved toward the docking bay, where Vaughn's ships would soon arrive. The docking bay doors slid open with a hiss, and Kyra stood stiffly as Commodore Vaughn entered, flanked by armed soldiers. His reptilian features were sharp and cold, his mechanical arm gleaming under the station's lights. Technician Vels, Vaughn said, his voice low and commanding. We received a distress beacon from this station. Explain. Kyra's mind raced. The human signal must have been intercepted. There was a glitch, she stammered. False alarm. I isolated the signal and shut it down. Vaughn's slitted eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, towering over her. A glitch? From this sector? Curious, given its reputation for being uneventful. I was running routine diagnostics, Kyra said quickly. Sometimes the system picks up old signals from debris fields. Nothing to worry about. Vaughn stared at her in silence, his gaze piercing. She fought the urge to fidget, keeping her expression as neutral as possible. Finally, he turned to one of his officers. Search the station. Thoroughly. Kyra's crystalline heart sank. If they found the humans, it was over. She forced herself to speak. Commodore, with all due respect, there's nothing here but miners and equipment. If you start tearing the place apart, you'll disrupt operations and cost us valuable ore shipments. Vaughn's gaze flicked back to her, a faint smirk curling his lips. A minor inconvenience if it ensures stability. Don't you agree, technician? Kyra clenched her fists, but she nodded. Of course. As the soldiers fanned out, Vaughn remained in the docking bay, his eyes scanning the room. Tell me, technician, he said casually, do you believe in myths? The question caught her off guard. Myths, sir? Yes, he said, pacing slowly. Legends. Stories of extinct species, forgotten relics, things that have no place in a civilized galaxy. He stopped and turned to her, his expression unreadable. Do you? Kyra's mouth felt dry. I don't see why myths would matter, sir. They're just stories. Vaughn's smirk widened. Stories have a way of causing trouble. They plant ideas, stir unrest. That's why they're best left buried. She didn't respond, afraid that any word might give her away. After what felt like an eternity, one of Vaughn's officers returned. No sign of unauthorized personnel, sir. The station appears clean. Vaughn raised an eyebrow. Appears clean? Hardly a conclusive report. Kyra's pulse quickened. She needed to get them out of here before they started tearing up maintenance tunnels. Commodore, she said carefully, If I may, you're welcome to continue searching, but the miners won't be happy about delays. And unhappy miners mean quotas aren't met. I doubt the Orion Pact wants that kind of disruption. Vaughn studied her for a long moment, then gave a faint nod. Perhaps you're right. For now. He gestured to his soldiers. Prepare to leave. But monitor this station. If anything unusual occurs. He let the threat hang in the air. Yes, sir, Kyra said, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her. As Vaughn and his men filed out, she let out a shaky breath. The humans were safe, for now. But Vaughn's parting words echoed in her mind. Back in the maintenance tunnels, Kyra found Cole and his crew huddled in the dim light. They're gone, she said quietly. For now, Cole replied, his expression grim. But they'll be back. And next time, we might not be so lucky. Kyra nodded, her resolve hardening. Then we need to figure out what to do before they come back. Because I think this is just the beginning. The dim, flickering lights of the maintenance tunnel painted eerie shadows across the narrow walls. Kyra crouched beside Captain Cole, her crystalline hands gripping a handheld scanner. The readings pulsed faintly in the dark, indicating power fluctuations deep within the station, a problem that had been growing worse since the Resolute docked. We need to stabilize this station, Kyra said in a hushed voice, her amber eyes scanning the display. If Vaughn's ships pick up another anomaly, they'll come back, and this time, they won't just search. Then we need to move fast, Cole said, his voice low but steady. He glanced at his two crewmates, Shaw, who was still pale and weak, and Lynn, whose sharp gaze belied her exhaustion. What's the plan? Kyra hesitated, her mind racing. First, we patch your reactor. If it fails, the station's sensors will flag your ship immediately. But, she trailed off, unsure how to voice her concerns. But what? Cole pressed. If the station's systems keep overloading, we're going to lose containment here, Kyra admitted. My supervisor will notice, and so will Vaughn. We don't have time to fix everything. The mining station isn't built for this kind of stress. Cole frowned, rubbing his temples as he thought. Then we need to make this place a ghost. Cut the station's signal output, fake a total shutdown. No signals, no heat signatures, no nothing. They won't come back if they think this rock's dead. Kyra blinked, surprised at his suggestion. A blackout? That's possible, but risky. The miners would assume we've suffered a catastrophic failure. They'll send an emergency team. And if they find you here, we'll deal with that when it comes, Cole interrupted, his tone firm. Right now we buy time. It's our only shot. Shaw, leaning against the wall, spoke up, his voice hoarse. We can handle the reactor, Captain. Lynn and I trained for worst-case scenarios. You just need to get us the parts. Easier said than done, Kyra muttered. She checked her scanner again, noting the irregular energy signatures from the Resolute. The station's spares are in the restricted storage deck. It's locked and monitored. If I access it without clearance, alarms will trigger. Cole studied her, his jaw tightening. Is there a way around that? Kyra hesitated, weighing her options. There's a manual override, she admitted, but I'll need to go through the primary control room. If anyone's monitoring the logs. We don't have a choice, Cole said, cutting her off. You get the parts. We'll keep your station from falling apart in the meantime. The control room was bathed in a soft blue glow, the screens flickering with data streams and energy readouts. Kyra moved quickly but carefully, her fingers gliding over the console. Every keystroke felt like a gamble. The override protocols weren't meant to be accessed by a lone technician, and she knew the system logs would flag the intrusion. A voice crackled over the comm system, making her jump. Kyra? She recognized Joratha's gruff tone immediately. Why, yes? She stammered, trying to keep her voice steady. What are you doing in the control room? He asked. I thought your shift ended hours ago. Kyra's mind scrambled for an excuse. There was a fluctuation in the radar array, she lied. I came to recalibrate the systems before we lose another round of our scans. There was a pause, and she held her breath. Fine, Jorith grumbled. But don't mess with anything outside your clearance. We've got enough problems without you breaking something. Yes, sir, she said, relief washing over her as the comm went silent. She returned to the console, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Finally, the override engaged, and the storage deck's lockdown lifted. A small window of opportunity. The storage deck was cold and silent, the rows of metallic crates standing like monoliths in the dim light. Kyra slipped inside, her steps quiet on the metal floor. She found the parts quickly: fuel stabilizers, coolant regulators, and a handful of other components she didn't fully understand. As she hefted the crate into her arms, a faint noise made her freeze. A soft clang, like metal on metal. Hello? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Nothing. Her crystalline skin shimmered faintly, a sign of her unease. She adjusted her grip on the crate and moved toward the exit, her eyes scanning the shadows. The station was supposed to be empty, but paranoia gnawed at her thoughts. When she reached the maintenance tunnels, Cole was waiting, his expression tense. Got it? Kyra nodded, handing over the crate. Everything you need. But we have to move fast. Jorith is already suspicious, and the system logs are going to flag my override. Lynn stepped forward, inspecting the parts with practiced efficiency. These will work, she said, her voice brisk. Give us an hour to stabilize the reactor. After that, we'll shut down the station's external signals. And then what? Kyra asked, her tone sharp. What happens when the miners show up to investigate? Cole didn't answer immediately. His gaze was distant, his jaw tight. We'll figure it out. Right now, survival's all that matters. True to their word, Lynn and Shaw worked quickly, their movements precise despite their obvious exhaustion. Kyra watched as they dismantled and repaired sections of the Resolute's reactor, her unease growing with each passing minute. You've done this before, she said, more to fill the silence than anything. Too many times, Lynn replied without looking up. The Resolute wasn't exactly built for luxury. We've been patching her together for years. Kyra hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at her since the humans arrived. How did you survive? After all this time? Shaw paused, wiping sweat from his brow. Cryostasis, he said simply. We were part of an expedition, one of the last before the war ended everything. We went into stasis when the ship got damaged, hoping someone would find us. But no one did, Lynn added, her tone bitter. We drifted for centuries. Woke up to find the galaxy had moved on without us. Kyra frowned. Why didn't you send a distress signal sooner? We did, Cole said, stepping into the room. Hundreds of times. Either no one heard us, or no one cared. Kyra's chest tightened at his words. The myths had always painted humans as reckless, dangerous beings who brought destruction wherever they went. But the people standing before her now didn't seem like monsters. They seemed lost. We're not here to cause trouble, Cole said, his voice softening. We just want a chance to live. To figure out where we fit in this new galaxy. Kyra met his gaze, her resolve hardening. Then let's make sure you get that chance. An hour later, the station's external signals went dark, the faint hum of its systems replaced by an eerie silence. The mining station was now, as Cole had put it, a ghost. But as Kyra stared at the Resolute, its patched hull barely holding together, she couldn't shake the feeling that their troubles were only just beginning.